So let's continue on my Spider-Man reviews with Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2. And I've got to say, out of every superhero movie I've ever seen, this might be my favorite superhero movie. Hands down, there are moments in this movie where, in terms of how incredibly well written, incredibly well acted this movie is, and how everything I think about this movie is truly incredible. This one, out of all the Spider-Man movies that I've seen so far, or that have been released and made so far, including Venom, this is my favorite Spider-Man movie, hands down. And I love a majority of the Spider-Man movies. Now, going into this, this is one of those reviews where I'm gonna talk about it in plot order because there are so many things that I can't bunch together like in different ways, so I'm going to talk about it through the plot. So I'm going to kind of give the plot while I talk about things I love, because I think this is an incredible superhero movie, and I love everything about this one in particular. I love how this one, like the first one, has a cool, really awesome opening, and it even bests the opening of the first Spider-Man, where the first one was just spider webs around in the city showing title cards in the first Spider-Man. In this one, it's red and it shows spiderwebs, but then it shows images hand drawn and painted of moments from the first movie. Every moment you need to know immediately that sets up the second movie, and it is incredible. And Danny Elfman again does the fantastic score like he did in the first one. His score is truly moving again. It is one of the best superhero scores ever. It stands up with like the original Superman score, like the Richard Donner one, or it fits with like the original Batman, Michael Keaton Batman, Tim Burton Batman. So it is one of those themes that is so incredibly memorable, and I love that it is done again and bested even better than the first one. Like the score is incredible as well. Everything about this movie bests the first one, and I love the first one. So that's why I think this is an incredible sequel. Like this is one of the best sequels I've ever seen. Really, truly one of the best. I like how after the opening credits, it opens up with Peter Parker. Well, it opens up with a picture of Mary Jane, zooms out on her, and she's doing like modeling her images on billboards. And that's a perfect way of how Peter really does love her, and he wants to get her out of his head, but she is everywhere, literally, because of her picture. Her picture's on the streets, on the billboards, on the walls. Like, that's great. And I love how that's the inner turmoil of him loving her and not being able to have her. So I love that it opens up with the image of her, about how he still thinks about her every day, how he describes how he truly loves her, but the life he lives, he can't have her. And it truly is moving with the opening. And then I love the fact that you immediately, like the last one, feel so much sympathy for Peter Parker, but it's different than the last one. Instead of Peter Parker being this geeky character at the beginning of the first film and he becomes Spider-Man and becomes quote-unquote cooler, in this one you feel sympathy for him at the beginning like the first one, but in this case Peter Parker is juggling everything in his life in a way where he can't do it all. He is Spider-Man full-time. He wants to be with Mary Jane. He wants to resolve his issues with Harry. He wants to pass his classes in college. He gets fired from his job right whenever the movie starts at this pizza place. Everything about that is just so cleverly put into how Peter Parker and his inner turmoil with everything is done, and it's done in an incredible way with everything that he is feeling, every inner thought, every inner turmoil, everything that is bothering him and hurting him throughout. I think is just so cleverly put in this movie. And I like how you see how hard he's trying to do this. Like, he wants to save people. Like, he has a duty. Like, he has a responsibility, but he's not able to do everything else in his life. And there's an awesome scene where Peter goes to Aunt May's house, and then it's a surprise birthday party, and it's Aunt May and Mary Jane and Harry. And I love how Peter talks to Harry, and Harry is saying to Peter, like, if you knew who he was, would you tell me? Because he thinks Spider-Man murdered his father. And in honesty, like Peter could immediately tell him like he could have found a way to say that he didn't kill his father, but maybe Harry wouldn't have believed him. But that wouldn't have made a movie either. But I really do like that there's this struggle between them both. How Harry just wants Spider-Man dead. He thinks his father is dead because of Spider-Man. And he explains to Peter, like, you would want him dead just like you want that killer who killed Uncle Ben dead. And I love how there's that connection between them both, because Peter and Harry in these first two movies really are kind of the same ends of a coin. Like, they both are characters that have different problems, but they're both struggling really hard. Like in the first movie, Peter was struggling being this geeky outcast. Harry was struggling being this rich kind of outcast that like he didn't want to be around his father and be part of the rich, like be rich, and like everybody made fun of him for that. And like Harry struggled with like Norman being loving Peter more than him. His own son wasn't loved as much as his best friend. And I love how they both, Peter and Harry, have such a great, like, they both have things that are very similar to each other. So that's why you could see why they're friends, but they also could become mortal enemies. Not in this movie, but you could tell that they could be later. And I love that scene between Peter and Harry where he's talking to him like he wants Spider-Man dead. He wants to kill him because it's just like how Peter like would want his uncle's killer dead. And I love how we get this scene after where Peter realizes there's a foreclosure on Aunt May's house, and she tries to give him cash. And this is one of there's so many incredible acting moments, but this moment in particular is great because Peter has no money. He's fired from his job. He didn't tell Aunt May that. Aunt May's got a foreclosure on the house. She's trying to give him a $20 bill. She puts it in his hand and she says, he says, I can't take it. And she says, yes, you can. You can take it. For God's sakes, just take it. And then she breaks down and says, I'm sorry. Like, can you believe it's been 2 years since Uncle Ben has left us? And she, like, just goes and cries about this horrible tragedy that still affects Peter. And I love how, again, Peter in this movie hasn't told Aunt May the truth about Uncle Ben yet. And that's the first of the implications that he will tell the truth to her later about it. But it is a great first scene where she breaks down because he won't take the money. He's got that much pride in him that he doesn't want to, and she just wants to help him out. So I love that scene between them both. And I also love too, like the scene right after where Mary Jane is talking to Peter, and like it's outside like the first movie, and all she wants him to say is that she loves him, and he wants to say it too, but he knows the risk. He knows he doesn't want her to get taken again or be killed, because she was taken in the last movie and almost killed. And whenever she doesn't get the answer out of him, she says to him that she's got a guy she likes and she's being friendly with. And you don't know who that is yet, but it throws Peter into another pit of like something worse. Like, I love that it makes Peter even more like depressed and more stuck in this situation. And then we get introduced to Otto Octavius, who is the villain of this movie, Alfred Molina, who is really, really good. He's one of the best Spider-Man villains. Like, he really is one of those characters you feel a lot of sympathy for. Like, Norman in the first one, like, he gets changed and he goes insane. And in this one, Otto Octavius gets, like, the inhibitor chip on the back of these tentacles that he has gets fried, so, like, they control him. And whenever you get to the end of the movie, like, you feel a lot of sympathy for him for what his final ultimatum is at the end of the movie. But for right now, you get introduced to him and his wife Rosie, and I really do like this performance. Like, he's really great in this movie. He's he's one that a person that Peter looks up to, and it connects to like Norman too, where like they're connected to Oscorp, and like they both like. Since Harry's in charge now, he gets Otto to try to fund him. but I really like Otto Octavius. Like I think he's a great villain, and I like how again shifting over to Mary Jane again. I like how Peter promises Mary Jane to go to her play, and he can't make it, and he calls her, and she is in the house while he's talking on the message, and then he's talking on a payphone, so the payphone money goes out, like the amount goes out, and it says you need to insert 50 more cents, and he doesn't. And I love the fact, it's just a great moment where he says, whenever the phone line's dead, he just says on the phone, okay, MJ, I'm going to tell you the truth. I am Spider-Man. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you, but if you knew the risk, if you knew that Spider-Man has enemies, if you knew that they would know that I love you, then you'd be in imminent danger. And I love that moment because he's not talking to her really, but I love the fact where he just says it on the phone. Like it's just he wants to say it so badly. It's such a great scene. I love that moment. And the action in this as well is really good. Like it honestly kind of bests the first one as well, because we get this great scene where it's at the bank because Aunt May, of course, is having the foreclosure in their house. They're trying to talk the banker into what they can do, and Joel McHale is the banker. That's funny. Like he's the person they're talking to, and Otto comes in because the tentacles are telling him to get money because they need to get the tritium or get more money to create this tritium thing, and I love that scene. It's such a great action scene because it starts in the bank. They have scenes in the bank, and the action is really well done. And then they go outside. Otto takes Aunt May up to a giant like clock tower, and Peter fights him outside. And like it really is really just how they move, how they attack each other is so different than the first one, but it feels like the first one. Like the first one was an experiment, I think, in the action category for this movie because it was the first Spider-Man movie. There was no other ones to go off of besides the comic books or the TV shows. But I love how this one, they just bested the action. They bested the action sequences with how Spider-Man moves, how he attacks, using Doc Ock as a cool villain who uses 4 tentacles is another cool difference. Like instead of Norman, who had the glider in the first one, which was a cool way as well to have different ways for the villain to best the hero. So I love that fight whenever they go up to the top of the tower and like Aunt May gets saved. Like Aunt May is of course saved, but I love how she gets in danger too, and I love how she helps in the fight. Like whenever Doc Ock has Spider-Man jump at him, he's gonna impale him, and then Aunt May just goes, "Shame on you," and then like hits him with her cane, and like that makes them fight and fall down, and like Doc Ock escapes. But I love that moment. Just a great moment for Rosemary Harris whenever she says "shame on you." Like it's just such a funny moment, but it's such an endearing, sweet moment too. And I love how after this we get to the scene at the planetarium where Peter is still working for the Daily Bugle, even though Jameson, who is awesome as he was in the first one, J.K. Simmons, Jameson says that he is fired, of course, but then he rehires him immediately. And they're at the planetarium for Peter taking pictures with Jameson and his wife and all these people at the planetarium. Then you realize a kind of heartbreaking moment because Peter... This is a fantastic scene because it builds on Peter again losing everything, and he is truly losing everything, where he finds out they walk down the stage, Mary Jane and her person that she loves, who she's been dating right now, John Jameson, who is an astronaut and who is J. Jonah Jameson's son. They are walking down, and Mary Jane gives Peter a look as Peter sees her, like she just gives a weird look to him and looks away, like this. You could have had this. You could have had me. Like she still loves him, and I love that. I love that Kirsten Dunst in this movie is really great, and her character. Honestly, her character could be interpreted as a bitch character in this movie, but she's not. Like she's this character who, like Peter, they love each other, and like she's so angry that like he won't have her, but like it's not in a way where she's a horrible person. Like she's not like gloating to him every single time, like about being with somebody else. She just wants to get the information out of him, like, because she loves him. So I love that scene of her and John walking down the stairs, and Peter sees them and has the realization that's who it is. And I love right after this. Again, it builds with Harry, because that action scene earlier where Peter attacks Doc Ock whenever he first gets the inhibitor chip broken, and they fight in the Oscorp building, and Harry loses everything. Like, he loses his money. He doesn't have any money anymore. I mean, he didn't gain any more money. He was gonna go to fame and fortune, he said, with Otto, until he realized that he went crazy. So Harry is drinking his woes away, and Peter goes up to him, and I love how James Franco is really incredible in this scene. But I love how he says, don't act like you're my friend. You stole MJ from me. You stole my father's love. You let him die because you didn't turn in the freak. Isn't that right? And then he just slaps Peter, and just slaps him a couple times, and Peter just sits there, and in the look in his eyes, it looks like he wants to retaliate, but he doesn't. He just walks away. And then I love how, again, it builds on Mary Jane, and how Peter goes outside and has a scene with her where she says, like, how he said he couldn't go to the play again, and then she says to him that John went to my play, Harry went to my play, Aunt May went to my play, my sick mother got out of bed to go to the play, my father even came. Yeah, he wanted to come back just to get cash, but at least he came. But my best friend, out of everybody in the world that has been able to come, my best friend can't make an 8 o'clock curfew. And then I realized that you're nothing to me than an empty seat. And he gives a look like he doesn't know what to say, because he's just lost everything. Like, because of this, being a hero has got all these costs. And I love how that scene where she just goes off on him about not going to the play, like, it works so well. And then whenever she leaves and walks away, they go back into the planetarium, and then she announces that, like, her and John announce that they're getting married. So sends Peter down another spiral as well. So now he is at an all-time low. He has dreams of Uncle Ben, like talking to Uncle Ben in the car, like he did in the first movie, and that's a really great moment. And Uncle Ben just, like, says to him, like, give me your hand, son. And then Peter just says in the dream, like, I'm sorry, Uncle Ben, I can't live your life anymore. I am Spider-Man no more. And, like, he goes and throws away his suit, like, throws it in the garbage. And then it cuts to, like, everything seems fine. Like, Peter gave up being a hero. Like, he gave up being a hero to have a normal life. Everything seems fine, even though creeping up to him, there's things that he sees that are not, like, whenever he's walking down the street and the raindrops are falling on my head song plays, he sees an ambulance fly by, and then he looks, and then he eats a hot dog real quick, like, just to distract himself, like, I better not do it. And he just seems like he's happier, and he goes to Mary Jane's play, and then nothing changes with him because he finally did it, but she's marrying that guy still. And I don't know, like, it just, I really love that he takes the suit away, and it takes him a while to go back to it. Like, he eventually becomes Spider-Man again, but whenever he is not Spider-Man in the movie, like, it works incredibly well. Because he had all this stress and it's all gone, but then he realizes that he needs it back again later. And, like, Jameson acquires a suit, and I love that scene where Jameson is just in the room, and he's just, like, wearing a suit and pretending he's Spider-Man. Like, that's a hilarious scene. But Peter starts having bad things happen again, where, like, it's getting worse. He encounters a guy that gets beat up in an alleyway, but then you see him turn to the direction of the camera, while the people behind him are beating up this guy with a backpack just to get his money, and Peter just walks away. And without a line of dialogue like from him. You know everything that's going in his head. Like he is so so wanting to save this guy, but like he doesn't want to have the responsibility again. It's hard to do all this at once. And like I love that. And then I love that whenever he's not Spider-Man for a while, he goes and tells Aunt May the complete truth. And this is one of the best scenes in any, like this is one of my favorite movie scenes ever, where Peter goes and tells Mary Jane the truth about Uncle Ben. The complete truth. He says like, I'm responsible for Uncle Ben. And she's like, what do you mean? Like, you were at the library, you were studying. And then he says like, well, I went to the library, but I never went in. I went to go somewhere to get some money to try to impress Mary Jane. And then the guy wouldn't pay the money, and I let him go. And then he went to Uncle Ben, and Uncle Ben said no to take his car. And Uncle Ben died that night, being the only person who did the right thing. And then he says, like, I held his hand when he died, and I've tried to tell you so many times. And he puts his hand on Aunt May's hand, and she backs away, like she pulls her hand away and looks at him, and then just gets up and walks away. And he's told her the complete truth. And I don't know, I love that moment. That's just such an incredible moment where like he tells that, and the performances are just incredible. And I love how after this, Peter goes, and he's not Spider-Man still, but there's a big fire in this building. He goes in, saves a little girl who's in the fire, and without the Spider-Man suit, just going in there, saving her. He goes in there, he saves this girl, almost dies, runs out, and then the firefighters are like, you got guts, kid. And then I love the fact that there's a conversation right after where Peter's listening to these two firemen, and one of the firemen says, some poor soul was trapped on the 4th floor. They didn't make it out. And then the look Peter gives, he turns around again towards the camera, he just stares, and it zooms in on his face, like, again, no dialogue, but it zooms in on his face where he realizes that he just let somebody die. Like, he wants to do this, but it's so hard it's such a hard responsibility. But that moment where he just, with no dialogue, you see him just looking out, like, it's incredible. Just him not, like, he's had somebody die. Like, he could have saved both of those people if he was Spider-Man. Like, it just builds on the guilt that he has with what he wants. Like, he doesn't know what he wants. And I love how after this, he goes to Aunt May and talks to her and apologizes. And she says, you're brave for telling the truth. And she and this boy Henry are working on taking everything, selling everything from her house, or a lot of stuff. She's going to move to an apartment. And the little kid Henry that Peter knew before, he says, like, where's Spider-Man? Like, you take his pictures, right? And then Peter just says, well, he quit. And then Henry just says, why? And then Peter just says, well, it was too hard for him. And I love this scene, too, because it implies that Aunt May might know that Peter could be Spider-Man. But I love that she says that Henry needs a hero. And I believe that there's a hero in all of us that keeps us honest, gives us strength, and finally lets us go and lets us die with pride, even though we have to be steady. And people need a hero. Kids like Henry need a hero. And again, like, it just is incredible in how Peter goes down in this rut, stops being Spider-Man, eventually go and get his suit and go back. But before that, Peter has this talk with Mary Jane where she comes out and talks to him. They go to a restaurant, and she's talking to him, and he tells her how he can't be there for her. And then I love her response, because she just flat out says, do you love me or not? And then just looks at him, and he just says, I don't. And then she just puts her head down and starts crying and says, you don't. He says, yeah. And then she says, tell me I want to know one thing. Kiss me. And then they kiss. And right whenever this happens, it's a great romantic moment with them. But it's an incredible moment too because he has a spider sense. Right whenever they are about to kiss, a car flies through the window, a literal car. They both jump, flail, and fly out of the way, and like Peter with his sense was able to do that. And Doc Ock comes in, and him and Harry are working together now, and he takes Mary Jane with him to this abandoned shack out in the water. And Peter finally gets his strength back and goes and becomes Spider-Man again. He gets the suit. He, after the anger of losing Mary Jane to Doc Ock taking her, he's gonna fight back. He's gonna go and save her. He's gonna finally go back and be a hero again. And then that leads to an incredible train scene, which this train chase is one of those moments, like in any superhero movie, that people always talk about. It's one of the coolest action scenes ever in a superhero movie. It's an incredible train chase. I love how I love how long it is. I love how it's such a cool location to have them both moving on a moving train, like all around. They could fall off, and Peter does fall off. He falls off all the way down to the ground, webs himself back up onto the train. But it's just really well done. It's an incredible action scene. I love that a lot. And whenever like his mask like gets kind of shredded or like burnt up, so like Peter has to take off his mask, and like Doc Ock leaves, Peter, with all his strength, with webbing the buildings, with putting his foot down on the tracks, like he stops the train like from going to the end that's not finished yet, and he faints and wakes up, and then these people see him without the mask on and just say, we won't tell anybody. And it's just a great moment because he was so heroic in this moment that they didn't care that he had his mask off. They didn't want anybody to know. They just want him to be. They're so glad that he rescued them, that he saved their lives. And somebody even says like, he's just a kid, no older than my son. And I like that it just is a great moment with him and these people on the train who just like were so thankful that he saved them. I love that. So I love that train sequence, and I love everything that comes out of it. And I love how like Harry gets Spider-Man. Like Otto promises Harry like, give me the tritium and I'll give you Spider-Man. Harry gets a knife, or a big kind of knife, and like goes up to Spider-Man and says, I want to see the look on your face before you die. And he pulls off the mask, and it's Peter, and he backs up, drops the knife, and says, Peter, no, that's impossible. And then Peter just says to him, like, Harry, where is MJ? He's got MJ. Half of the city is going to die. Like, tell me where she is. And then all Harry just says to him is like, Peter, you killed my father. And then Peter, of course, could have said something different, but Mary Jane's in danger, and he says, like, right now it is bigger than both of us. Like, this situation is bigger than both of us, so tell me where she is. And he goes to the abandoned shack where she is, and this final fight is really good, where Mary Jane is in peril again, but it's not like in Spider-Man 3, it's more annoying when she's in peril, but in this one, the first two, it's not as annoying that she's in peril. But she's in peril in this shack where like the tritium is like sucking everything in. Like half of New York's gonna be destroyed. Everything's gonna be sucked into this thing. Mary Jane fights and helps Peter too, but in the end, Peter talks to Otto and has him to where he controls the tentacles again. Like the tentacles controlled him because of the inhibitor chip being broken, but he starts to control them, and I love how Otto, who lost everything, who lost his wife in the first fight, who is gone mad, like, he goes and he sacrifices himself with the tritium. Like, he goes and, like, breaks it to where it's going to go underwater, and he's going to drown underwater and die, but he did it in a noble sacrifice. And that's what I mean by this character, this villain being great, is he's such an interesting character, and he's got a great performance. And everything that he's gone through, he gives it up because of this line that he says earlier in the movie to Peter about eventually you have to be steady and let go of all the dreams that you've had. And is such a cool payoff to what they say earlier with that line. So he self-sacrifices himself, and Peter, without his mask on, turns around, and this is the most I get goosebumps watching this, because he turns around. Mary Jane gives him a look with no dialogue. She just gives him a look I knew it, I knew it, because he has no mask on, like Peter Spider-Man, and she finally realizes it. And then of course they're in peril again, but they get out of it. But I love that conversation where they get out of this and Doc Ock goes down and dies. They're up on a web now that he makes, and he's talking to her, and he says, now you know why I couldn't tell you this, because Spider-Man will always have enemies. And then she just cries, and they both cry together and sit there on the web, and then the police come, and John Jameson comes out, and Peter takes Mary Jane down, and then Mary Jane and him and John hug, but she looks out and sees Peter just standing there up on a crane, and she just starts tearing up and crying even more, not because she's seen John, but because she knows the truth now about Peter Parker. I love it. It's such a great moment. So I love that so much, and I love how after this, it immediately changes everything about what she's wanted through the whole movie. I mean, she hasn't really wanted to marry the John guy, but now it's set in stone that she knows that he's Spider-Man, so you see a scene where Mary Jane is just sitting there while the person is fixing up her wedding dress. She's just sitting there getting ready for her and John's wedding, just sitting there in the mirror, looking, debating, what's she gonna do? Of course, you see the wedding and the music plays and she's supposed to walk out, and then another woman walks out with a note to John. And then I love that moment where J.K. Simmons, just as Jonah Jameson says, Brenda, we gotta cancel the caviar. And that's so funny because he's saying that in a moment where his son just lost his wife he was gonna marry. She's not gonna marry him. And he's we gotta cancel, we gotta get not have the caviar put out, that costs a lot of money. And the wife just looked at him are you serious? And then it cuts to Mary Jane running down, just down by a fountain, running down the street in the wedding dress, looking as happy as she ever has been. And she goes into Peter's apartment and he's looking out the window, and she's just behind him, and she comes in and tells him that they truly do love each other, and that she doesn't care about the risk. She just wants to be with him. She doesn't care. She wants to. She says to him we can't live half of our lives. We've got to. They've got to do this. They've got to be with each other, and they do. And I love the fact that it plays perfectly with how he's Spider-Man, because then they kiss and they are together. But then radio says something's happened somewhere, so Peter looks at her and she just says, "Go get him, Tiger." And he puts on the suit, goes out, and you see him flying around the city. And then it cuts back to her just sitting at his apartment window, just putting her hand on the side of the outside, just looking and giving a look she doesn't know what's going to come out of this, but she loves him and he loves her. So despite the risks, they're going to be with each other. And that's how it ends. And it ends in a perfect way where, even though Spider-Man 3 isn't as good as the first two, nope, it sets it up really perfectly. And it also set it up perfectly with Harry, because I didn't mention either that Harry, after realizing Peter was Spider-Man 2, he finds his dad's secret lair and starts hearing his dad, and he finds the glider. So, Harry's going to become maybe the villain of the next one, if you've seen Spider-Man 3, which I think people have. So this just does a fantastic job of being a second chapter. I love how this movie is so incredibly, I care so much about these characters, and I felt like this is incredibly well written with how these characters, with their performances, with the writing, everything about them. This movie truly is one of the most moving superhero movies I've ever seen. I care the most about these characters in almost any superhero movie. And there's other ones that I love as well, but this one is one of the top superhero movies I've ever seen, on account of the performances and the writing and the action, the emotion. the music, the cinematography, like everything about this is incredible. And the villain too, like everything about this just blows me away. It's an incredible second chapter that just does everything perfectly right in my opinion. I think this is an incredible movie. I think this is my I think this is my favorite superhero movie ever right now. And rewatching it, I just solidified that fact. So thank you guys so much for watching. Tell me down below what you think of Spider-Man 2, if it's your favorite or which Spider-Man is your favorite. So thank you guys so much for watching.